Hi, students. So last week we talked about test anxiety. And, if you have test anxiety, you may find taking tests to be very difficult. And so this week I hope to give you some strategies on how to study for tests and take tests so that you can reduce your test anxiety and hopefully get some better test scores. So, what do we need to do to study for a test? Well, first of all, we need to start early. So, I have already suggested that, we use the 25-5 method where we study for 25 minutes, we review for 5, and take a break for 5, and continue that over and over again. So, um, we want to be able to do that starting early. You don't want to do this right before you take a test, the day of or the night before. So make sure that you are keeping up with your readings and assignments. It is difficult to start studying early if you haven't read the material that you need to read or you haven't watched the lectures that you need to watch. Avoid cramming for your tests. A lot of students think, well, the closer that I study to the test, the more I'm going to remember. And that is just not true. And in fact, there's this thing called the forgetting curve where you lose 50% of what you have learned, what's stored in your memory after a half hour. Okay. You can also try the chunking strategy, where you take 7 at a time. Maybe it's 7 minutes, maybe it's 7 pages, 7 problems. And we kind of talked about that in another lecture from last week. That is something that you could potentially do to kind of build your mental stamina. And don't have too much pride, okay? Don't think that you are just going to be able to remember everything. There is no shame in starting to study early for a test. That's actually the best way to do it, and you're more likely to remember it if you start studying early. Finish all of your readings 3 days prior to your exam. So you want to work backwards from your test date, and plan out your readings. Break everything down so that you have 3 days leading up to the test, so you're not reading any new material. And during those 2 days prior to the test, make sure that you're resting and you can also review the material instead of just trying to learn something new and then reviewing everything all over again at the last minute. Okay. It's also important to ask your instructors questions about the test. What is the format? How many questions are there on the test? How much time will I have? How much is going to be from the text versus the lecture? And why do we need to ask that? Well, that helps prepare us mentally, for what to expect on the exam. I think that that kind of reduces your test anxiety, and it's okay to ask those questions. Maybe some instructors won't give you that information and others will, but there's never any harm in just asking your instructor what you can expect on the test. Okay. Please do not study the morning of an exam. Make sure that, especially if you're taking an in-person class, that you've kind of packed everything up the night before and you're getting an adequate amount of sleep. Do not pull an all-nighter the night before an exam. Take this from me. I pulled a lot of all-nighters when I was a college student, and that really never did anything for my test scores. I thought that, it would help me to try to remember, the night before, but really we need rest, we need sleep. We learned that our brain needs nourishment, right? Make sure that it's getting the adequate amount of water as well, right? We need to stay hydrated. Um, make sure that you are, if you're taking an in-person test, to arrive early. If you're taking an online test, making sure that you are giving yourself enough time to take the test, that you're not trying to do it at the last minute, right? If you have an exam that's due at 11:59 and you have an hour to take the test, show up before 11 o'clock p.m. to take the test, because we all know that technology fails us when we need it the most. Okay. Avoid talking to others about the test, because that can kind of increase um, your anxiety. I experienced this a lot as a student. Talking to other people about the test, maybe um, about how much they had studied or what they had studied, or did not study, that would give me a lot of anxiety, feeling like I didn't do enough. And so just avoid talking about it altogether, and just trust that you've done what you needed to do for your test. Again, if you're taking an in-person test, you might need to bring headphones, right? Depending on what the format of the exam is. And this is not saying like, oh yeah, you can use your AirPods, while you're taking a test. Absolutely not. I don't know any instructors who would allow that. But there are some exams, maybe where there's a listening portion or something like that. Also, write down your worries and maybe even write down some affirmations. And so last week, you guys learned about the worry dump. So try that about 10 minutes before your test. Write down all of your fears, all of your worries, crumple it up. Throw it in a trash can outside of the classroom that you are taking your test in, or outside of the room that you are taking the test in, so that it's kind of, those worries are out of sight, out of mind. But also give yourself positive affirmations too. Trust that you have done the work that you needed to do, and that you are prepared to take your exam. Okay, so in the next lecture, we are going to be talking about taking objective tests. So make sure that you tune in to that lecture.